Yeah, I just had to eat my my peanut butter. You guys didn't want to watch me do that.
We didn't. Thank you for that, Molly.
Oh,
Okay, it's straight up to 6 o'clock. Hi, Joe. Everybody give me the thumbs up that you can hear me okay. Excellent. Okay. Joe, we're all going to mute ourselves except for whomever's speaking. And if you want to be recognized, just raise your hand or use the chat function. That's cool. There we go. All right, it's 6 o'clock. Welcome to the study session of April 7th, 2020, and our first really all virtual experiment here. I think we've all had some practice at this over the last couple of weeks, I would assume. So it should go fairly well. We do have, just a reminder that we do have citizens who are participating, although we won't be able to see them. This will be streamed, and Brianna, you can go ahead and start streaming anytime now. We do have staff also available to us this evening, and Lori or Karen, or both, are making sure that the roll has been called and that any pertinent notes are taken for follow-up. So everybody good with that so far? All right, virtual head nodding all over the place. So we'll start off then with the rail abandonment. I believe Grant's going to give us an update on that.
Thank you. I've got a presentation I'm going to pull up here real quick and do a screen share. Actually, with the water rights was first, I believe. Is that correct? Mayor?
Yeah, Grant, it is correct. Water rights was first.
Thank you, Grant.
Okay. I thought I had it in the right order. So the council would ask for an update on our water rights application as we're getting very near getting that the pilot project mitigation plan back to the Department of Ecology for their review. So this is that update. I'm just going to hit the high points and not get into a great deal of detail, but do understand that it has been a Herculean effort by our water rights team, including Bill Brogan, Phil Brown, who's our hydrogeologist, Stephen from Golder, who is our water rights modeler, and Robert Montgomery, who is doing a lot of the net ecological benefit analysis for us, as well as your staff. So it's I don't want to underestimate how major this project is. So as you may recall, when the Hearst and Foster Fix legislation was adopted by the legislature, it allowed 5 pilot projects to proceed, and the goal there was to allow these projects to do out-of-kind mitigation rather than avoiding all impacts, and then monitor those mitigation measures over time to see if they would be an effective tool in the future to approve other municipal water rights. Key to that legislation is what we call mitigation sequencing, which is similar to other environmental regulations such as wetlands and critical areas. Before you can get to just mitigating for a impact, you have to go through a process to try to, at all costs, avoid impacts, and then to minimize those impacts. And if you finally can't do both of those, then you get to do a mitigation project to make up for the impacts. For us, we had a history of going through this as a very similar process that we went through on the first application. So we did have a little bit of a head start on some of the other pilot projects, but we took it another step because net ecological benefit and some of the terms in the act were undefined, and we wanted to make darn sure that we're setting the standard for what they should be. We don't want to be found to not meeting those kind of vague marks. So in looking to avoid the impact altogether, we looked at a number of engineering solutions to basically storing water during the wintertime and then releasing it during the shoulder seasons, where we have our only and very minimal impacts on the Deschutes and the Nisqually rivers. So we looked at aquifer storage, which is actually pumping water into the ground and then pumping it back out in the summertime. We looked at above ground storage, building huge storage tanks up at the upper reaches of the Deschutes River and then releasing that water in the shoulder seasons. We looked at pumping reclaimed water from our plant up to the Smith Farm in the Deschutes watershed. And we looked at pumping reclaimed water up to the headwaters, not the headwaters, but up the upper reach of the Nisqually River. As you can imagine, and I can't see Steve right now, but I'm sure he's looking aghast, those are very, very expensive propositions. So we determined that it was unreasonable to avoid all those impacts with these very, very expensive projects that are mitigating for impacts that are very, very minor in the shoulder seasons. We'd much rather spend that money on doing something good for the overall habitat of the river. We also looked at trying to minimize our impacts again, and we dusted off the old water rights search document that we had completed with Olympia and Lacey back for the first round. And we did this internally, actually, at this point, with a lot of GIS work and tracking down old records. We looked at every water right within the impact area within the Deschutes and the Nisqually rivers and tracked down those rights to see if they were still active and they could be retired to minimize our impacts during the shoulder seasons. And we did have some leads, actually. I was not really expecting it because we had beaten the bushes pretty hard before and found the ones that we had already retired. But we did find a couple possibilities that we looked into, but one of them was for a PUD, and they were inchoate rights, which means they haven't been used yet, and those don't count. So that lead dropped away. And then when the Lawyer Nursery off Yelm Highway became available, including their water rights, we looked at, followed closely the auction on that, and it went for far more money than we would have been able to come up with to retire those rights. It was ultimately purchased by Country Green, the turf farm. So we wound up back to looking at mitigation options. So we looked through our old plan to see what we had already done in many cases and could do to mitigate for our those minor impacts in the shoulder season. We found a bunch of those projects that we've already done and some new ones, and identified the doable ones. But then we had an issue with this term in the Act itself called net ecological benefit. So if you remember a couple slides ago, if you get to the mitigation stage, you have to show that out of kind of mitigation, which means not water for water, has a net ecological benefit to the watershed, the habitat of the watershed. But that term itself was undefined. So we have no direction on what net ecological benefit actually means. So we, being good stewards of our environment, we actually brought Robert Montgomery back, who had put together the original mitigation plan up at the Smith Ranch. And he and his team ran through a number of different methodologies for determining whether mitigation would have a net ecological benefit on different parts of the habitat, one for salmonids and one for overall health, one for trout, that kind of thing. So we used a number of different methods, all of which are best available science to be able to conclude that we are providing a net ecological benefit to the watershed when we're finally done. So where we're now at is getting very close to finalizing the mitigation document, and we're working with ecology to see what that review process looks like and how we can support them in their review of the plan, and hopefully get to another report of examination, which is ecology's approval of our water rights. So that is my update.
Okay, well, Grant, if you'll take down, there we go. Molly?
So when you said that you didn't know what a net biological benefit,
Net ecological benefit?
net ecological benefit was, and you said that there was no definition, have you contacted anybody to actually get a definition?
Well, yes. I mean, our consultants especially, and the other pilot projects, were bugging ecology to find out, what does this mean to you? What does this mean to you? Now, as a regulator with a brand new law that's undefined, I don't blame ecology for not wanting to give that direction, because it's completely untested in court. So they don't know yet what it's going to land at. It's going to be ultimately up to the Pollution Control Hearings Board and the courts to define what that means. So again, we took a very conservative approach and looked at how that term is defined in a variety of other statutes revolving around water and habitat restoration. And we basically used them all.
Okay, so I guess I'm just wondering, definition, guys, you know,
Yeah,
that doesn't seem fair,
trying to do
right?
that. It's not going to happen. Did you catch that? All the pilot projects have been trying to do that, and ecology will not define that outside of a regulatory process, rulemaking process.
Who do we talk to make them do? Who do we talk to make them do that? I mean, would we talk to our legislators or
nobody? No. And again, I don't want to dwell on this, because we wouldn't be going forward if we weren't confident that we'd meet that standard and can defend that standard if we have to appeal it ourselves, a decision. So.
But that logic totally doesn't work. You can't say that you're confident in meeting a standard that doesn't exist.
No, I can see that absolutely, because we've been very, very conservative in how we're approaching this and how we're evaluating our own documents.
Whatever.
Terry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in new territory, so it's just something that has to happen. But do we have any idea on the timeline, Grant? I'm sure not, right?
Not a certain timeline, but we do expect it to be reviewed fairly quickly, especially in the water rights world. I would expect ecology to have a report of examination before the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Grant on the water rights update? Okay, then we'll move on to Grant for the rail abandonment.
Yep, I'm going to share my screen again. Bear with me here.
Thank you. And a reminder, folks, if you have, when this presentation is up, I can't see you, most of you. So if you have something you'd like to break in with, please either unmute yourself and just barge in, or better yet, chat me on the chat function, and I can call on you.
Right. Thank you, Mayor Foster. We're getting ready to bring to council a contract for management of the rail line as a pedestrian trail, and it seemed timely. This has been it started in 1999 when we purchased the rail line, and we've touched base with the councils over the years on the approach. But this council in its present form hasn't seen really the entire history. So we wanted to kind of go through that and show you how we got to where we are, and with the applications and contracts that we're moving forward with to get this now pedestrian multi-use trail system constructed. So back in 1999, the city purchased the old Prairie Line Rail from BNSF. It was partly purchased and partly donated by BNSF back in 1999. And at the time, the plan was to try to work with a short line railroad hauler, which is not BNSF. That would be somebody like Tacoma Rail, or establish our own short line rail line to serve the industrial zone. The grant documents, the city share was mostly grant funded, included the requirement that we construct a multi-use trail along with the rail line, using the corridor to connect the Thurston County and Pierce County regional trail systems. So during those early years, we looked for funding mechanisms and partners to get that rail line active again. In 2007, we requested $3.5 million from the legislature to refurbish the line and connect it with Tacoma Rail, just this side of our side of Roy. That money wasn't received, and then since then, Tacoma Rail's changed their focus and their mission, and they were a partner in that application back in 2007. But towards the end of the decade and early part of this decade, or last decade now, their mission changed a little bit, and they no longer were supportive of a partnership to get that done. And since that time, we've really done no maintenance on the rail line. And if you've walked it, you can see that it's in pretty bad shape. The bridge over the Nisqually River is the major concern there. It would take a lot of money, way more than 3.5 that we asked for back in 2007, to bring it up to current standards to run rail lines over it. So over time, just because we're not a rail company and we don't have the stuff that we need to maintain it for a rail line, it's deteriorated to the point where the decision was kind of made for us to abandon that dream of rail usage in the industrial area. So back in 2017, some of you may remember, we applied for a trail grant from the RCO to begin the initial engineering and constructing a portion of the trail, basically from where it ends now near the canal to the Nisqually River Bridge. We didn't get that money, but we're getting ready to reapply. It's time to reapply now. Those grants are open again. We're getting ready to reapply for that money. In the meantime, there's been an effort out of Pierce County to fund the construction and engineering of the trail from Roy to the river. So we're working along with those folks for some synergy to get those two projects moving. Pierce County's been very, very interested in this, as well as Thurston, because this is the link between two regional trail systems, and eventually, when those are get on a trail in Centralia or Chehalis and make it all the way up to to Snoqualmie Pass or into King County. So we're kind of a key link in that entire thing because we're the only way across the Nisqually River. In addition to that, as part of the Yelm Loop design, we began working with WashDOT to abandon the rail line as a rail line, because if it was even, as degraded as it was, and as unlikely as it is that we'd ever have a train on there again, if it is an active track, WashDOT would have to either put a bridge over it or put in very costly rail product, the barriers and things that come down, just in case it ever became active again. So in working with our washed out projects to make that project more affordable, we started going through the abandonment process. Not abandoning it for ever, just for rail purposes. We've continued to work with washed out to make sure that the loop trail is going to be tied in with the Prairie Line Trail. So where that brings us now.
Grant, sorry, can I just ask one question while we're right there?
Yes.
Isn't this like a pedestrian trail, and instead of converting back into rail quality, can't we just do something way less expensive and make it a pedestrian trail?
Yes, that's what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
Not just pedestrians, it would be a multi-use trail. So bikes, horses, pedestrians.
So we wouldn't need the 3.5 million, right?
And ultimately that project would have been much more expensive today than it was back in 2007. So that I would guess that's a $20 to $25 million project to run rail.
Quick question, if I can. For the bridge portion, regardless if this becomes a trail for people or not, there'll still be a need to rebuild a bridge or at least do some kind of maintenance or something on the bridge, correct?
That's correct, but it's a lot easier to maintain a structure that's designed to hold up humans versus trains.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just making sure there still have to be some kind of modification to the bridge itself or some kind of structural integrity check of the bridge.
Structural integrity check for sure. The actual, the development of the trail itself should be very cost effective because the base is there. Even the railroad bridge, it's really just a matter of redecking and making sure that it's safe and people can't jump off. But it's a much more straightforward process than even building a trail from scratch. So the next step is we've actually initiated the abandonment process and have support from Utilities and Transportation Commission. Oops, sorry. And BNSF, they've been part of that process as well. But we don't want to go all the way through the abandonment process. So the way the rules work, I am no expert in all this. It gets very, very complicated, the federal regulations around this. But in a simplified format, if as the owner of the rail line, if we enter into a contract with an order to, then that stops the abandonment process. And it basically allows us to retain all ownership interest in the corridor. It does mean that at some point we can convert it back to rail, but that's very unlikely anywhere past the city of Yelm. That's all. That's going to be coming for the council is the grantee. The rail or trail agency is the grantor, and that's the city of Yelm. So when I asked Brent to put this contract together, I told him very clearly that he needs to be hard on us and not just do this for $1. And if we pay $1, that's too much. It should be 50 cents. And that he can't bill us for both sides. That's where we're at, and that'll be a council meeting or so. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. Councilmember Wood here.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but did you say that what you're asking us to do here is to take it out of the process? You said that it's in right now of the process of abandonment, at which point, not saying that we would convert it to rail, but it would put us in a position to have that option again. Did I hear you say that?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Molly.
So I guess I'm a little confused. I thought we were doing exactly the opposite. I thought that we are abandoning it so that it can be claimed by, say, WashDOT, so that WashDOT can make the trail and that Yelm doesn't have to make the trail. Is that, I mean, who actually owns it right now?
The city of Yelm, and
Okay.
Burlington Northern has some interest in part of it as a I forget the term, but where they store cars to go back and forth. They haven't done that forever, and they've not indicated that they have any problem not doing that, because their last user there, the Wilcox Farms, is no longer active. So they're not using the line at all at this point. To abandon, if that still gets them and all that, with the contract, we can let council member would continue with the abandonment at some point. So it just kind of stays off any action as long as we're using it as a trail.
I'll jump in here also just to say that this is being worked on diligently from the Pierce County side of things as well, and have gotten the support of the Pierce County Council all the way down through the Parks group. And at some point, this will probably become a regional ownership, such as the Thurston, the Yelm Tenino Trail is mostly owned by county. We hope to see that model in the future as well, because we don't really want to have the maintenance of it all the way to Roy, but we have to be the one to get this started. And so we're involving as many regional partners as we can, and we'll try to use as many regional dollars as we can to make this happen as well.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a good point. This contract that you'll see with elves right now doesn't mean that we can't contract with somebody else to do it. The trail agency forever.
Okay. And so I think James asked, how much is this going to cost? Is this, I mean, this is just a contract with ourselves, right? So it's not going to cost anything. Is that correct?
Yes, Brent negotiated very well for us on both sides.
He can't help himself. Yeah, this is just to keep the train moving tracks, so come to the future study sessions. This has also been identified as a regional trails plan by the Thurston Regional Planning Council, and so you've got a lot of people who want to make this thing happen. Any other questions that council wanted to have? Utility bills, and I think Heidi, if Mike or Steve wanted just to the financial with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Make sure financial information and then kind of drill down into the utilities there, just to let council know a little bit more of the lay of the land, and then see where they want to take it from that point. And
All right,
I can do that. And then Steve, if you want to have add any other context in your role with Public Works, that'd be helpful. Grant, can you pull up the screen here and share it for folks whenever you have a chance?
There you go.
Thank you. So first, we just wanted to look big picture at what was happening financially with the city of Yelm, kind of what we know, what we don't know, which is the majority of things, because there's a lot of variables right now. And then we want to share with you what we're doing, and then drill down into the utilities if that works. Grant, do I have control, or do you have to pivot each slide? Never mind. Well, there you go. There's our overarching goal to channel EJ Curry. I will not read that to you. I know you're all fully capable of reading. At least Tad is once he gets his glasses on. So these are the numbers that the state of a increase. So certainty with what's happening right now, the aspect of to Yelm variables, no bills on time, but having hardship, you are very familiar of not turning on utilities, a payment for the pay their bill time frame will be coming in, and what that looks like is reserved. So it's start thinking options. Please.
Yes, are those months? Is if we don't see.
No, literally $0 came in. We could last 4 policy dollars came in. We
I'm still going to have.
In a worst case scenario, and we
From
In all of the, let me turn my 4 months. So it's like, you know, police, etc., or other things.
Great. So not the infrastructure, if that's what you 4 months in an absolute building and doing.
Cody,
And I know it's early, we're probably going to not see the, but has there
lady,
Short version. Heidi and Mayor.
is available. I take that.
Yeah, I was gonna, and the property